NAFTA update. Man, September 21st, 2018, NAFTA update. This is yesterday. This is September 20th at 1:42 p.m. This was published. This is just her confirming that she's going in to talk to people, but she leaves. So this is just kind of setting the stage for where we're at. Sorry, I don't want the, there we go.
Meeting yesterday concluded. Our negotiators continue to work hard with their American counterparts. That work has continued this morning. We also, as we have been doing frequently throughout this negotiation, particularly in this sort of intense, continuous negotiation period, we spoke to the Prime Minister this morning to update him on where we are. And now we're going in to see Ambassador Lighthizer and his team. I'll be happy to answer your questions afterwards.
All right, and she goes in to presumably negotiate. Okay, so this is posted yesterday, updated 2 hours ago, I suppose, but it was yesterday evening that it was originally published. Quote, and it's a Globe and Mail article originally. The link will be in the description. There's the time. Quote, Canada-US NAFTA talks on pause after 2, quote, tough days. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland left Washington on Thursday ahead of a looming congressional deadline for a NAFTA deal. With no conclusion in sight and no firm plans for the next face-to-face meeting with a U.S. Trade Representative, Rob Lighthizer. But she insisted she was feeling no sense of urgency despite 2 days of, quote, tough talks. Quote, for Canada, we have one target, she told reporters after a 3-hour-long meeting with Mr. Lighthizer at his office on Thursday. Our target is a good deal for Canada. It was our target from the start. It's our target now. It's the only thing we're thinking of. We discussed some tough issues today. The atmosphere continues to be constructive. The two sides will not meet Friday as Ms. Freeland heads to Montreal to co-host a gathering of female foreign affairs ministers next week. She will be in New York for the UN General Assembly. The U.S. Congress had hoped to have a deal by the end of the month so it can start reviewing the final text. Some members of the Republican caucus warned this week that Canada had better make concessions to get a deal or the United States could move ahead with a proposed two-way pact, with Mexico. But Ms. Freeland shrugged off the warnings. Quote, I'm paid in Canadian dollars, she said, even as the prospect of a deal next week seemed increasingly remote. The Foreign Affairs Minister's attitude seemed to be summed up by a T-shirt her children made for her, which she sported as she arrived in Washington on Tuesday night. Quote, keep calm and negotiate NAFTA, it read. So I thought, my goodness, she didn't say I'm paid in Canadian dollars to dismiss the idea that no NAFTA deal would be a bad thing. And oh yeah, she did.
Look, as we've said from the beginning, I am paid in Canadian dollars. U.S. legislators are paid in American dollars. It is.
So yeah, that's how much he cares, guys. That is about the extent of how much he cares. I am paid in Canadian dollars. Financial Post today, quote, potential NAFTA collapse poses major risks to Canada, Conference Board warns. Already, uncertainty has plunged business confidence to lows not seen since the financial crisis. Good job! A self-inflicted financial crisis thanks to Justin Trudeau and his completely inept negotiating team led by Ms. Freeland. Okay, quote, that was not the article, that was me just talking. Back to the Financial Post. Quote, Canada's economic growth could be pared down by about a quarter next year if the new North American Free Trade Agreement collapses, and the drag will be extended if an automotive trade war emerges, according to a new conference broad forecast. But if the collapse of NAFTA is followed by a trade fight, okay, hold on, I'll read the whole thing. Failing to renew the trade pact currently, the subject of intense negotiations between the U.S. and Canada and Washington would cut growth by 0.5 percentage points next year before the economy recovers in 2020, the Ottawa-based research group said Thursday in the Autumn Economic Outlook. But if the collapse of NAFTA is followed by a trade fight with both nations imposing automobile tariffs, the impact of growth will persist. A NAFTA collapse could, coupled with a trade fight, would curb the growth by 0.6 percentage points next year and then another 0.7 points in 2020, the group estimates. President Donald Trump has threatened to leave Canada out of an agreement the U.S. struck with Mexico and impose auto tariffs on his northern neighbor. I think I think that was just, I think we had an opportunity, and we still have an opportunity to join. He's not threatening. He's giving us an opportunity and a deadline to join, and I think we should join. Okay, back to the article. The OECD now sees Canada economy expanding 2% in 2019 rather than the 2.2% it forecast earlier. The lack of uncertainty, the lack of clarity of the future of the trade agreement is creating an, quote, uncertain operating environment, and only 34% of business leaders believe now is a good time to invest, the lowest level since 2008. Carbon tax and concern over the country's tax competitiveness also weighing on business confidence, he said. Yeah, and that's because Justin Trudeau's gender-based budget didn't actually address anything that Donald Trump did in the United States after his election and then ascension to the president of the United States. Those were big things, and Canada didn't respond, and businesses are going to respond. If you can cut your margins by 20% by moving across the border, I'm sorry, guys, there's only so long people can take that, and especially with the uncertainty in Canada at this point in time, and the prospect of Trudeau putting more legal loopholes and blockades up to businesses and Canadians in the future. Another Financial Post article. NAFTA pressures heat up after senior congressman warns Canada the time's running out. This is yesterday. I did a video on this. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise warned there was, quote, growing frustration over Canada's stubbornness and urged it to make the concessions needed for a, quote, fair agreement. Ever since the U.S. struck a surprise, wide-ranging trade deal solely with Mexico last month, defenders of Canadian negotiating tactics have argued there was little to worry about. After all, they reasoned, Congress would never approve a bilateral NAFTA update that left out its northern neighbor. But that security blanket seemed rather more threadbare Tuesday after a leading House Republican warned that there was growing frustration in Congress over Canada's stubbornness and urged it to make the concessions needed for a fair agreement. So, not only do we have Chrystia Freeland claiming that she's paid in Canadian dollars, she's sitting on the panel of the Taking on a Tyrant event, which I'm just going to play the intro for you. It's like 30 seconds, worth the watch, worth the 30 seconds that we're going to spend on it anyway, to remember she's in the middle of negotiating NAFTA while pulling this crap.
There's a name for Viktor Orban's system of government. He calls it illiberal democracy. It's basically the primacy of populist nationalism over individual freedoms.
On the campaign trail, Italy's new interior minister used hardline rhetoric to fire up the voters.
Fake, disgusting news.
This was a direct act by the Russian state against our country.
Look at the smile. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I agree with what's on the screen. My goodness. So, yeah, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go and have good faith negotiations with NAFTA. Oh, right. Quote, White House from the Toronto, or the Edmonton Sun, Lily, White House not amused with Freeland's tyrant antics. Yeah, shocker, right? You can read this article by yourself, but yeah, pretty much everyone knows they aren't happy, said a source who asked not to be named. Maybe it's fiction. Either way, it's not a good idea, Ms. Freeland. And this one's not fiction. From Reuters, quote, U.S. Very close to proceeding with Mexico-only trade deal, Trump advisor. The United States is getting very, very close to having to move forward on its trade deal with Mexico without Canada, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said on Friday. They are being as clear as possible. Get in on this or you will be left out. And if we're left out, that's a big deal. Listen up. Okay, quote, there is just over a week to go before an October 1st deadline to publish the text of a deal to update the North American Free Trade Agreement. And the United States and Canada have still not agreed on terms, Hassett told Fox News Channel. We're still talking to Canada, and we're getting very, very close to the deadline where we're going to have to move ahead with Mexico all by themselves, said Hassett, who chairs the White House Council of Economic Advisors. I'm a little surprised that the Canadians haven't signed up yet, Hassett added. I worry that politics in Canada is trumping common sense because there's a very good deal that was designed by Mexico and the US to appeal to Canada, and they're not signing up, and it's got everybody over here a little bit puzzled. Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland left Washington on Thursday after 2 days of bilateral talks with the United States failed to achieve a breakthrough. Access to Canada's dairy market, trade dispute settlement panels, that's Chapter 19, and U.S. demands for the ability to impose auto tariffs on its northern neighbor remain sticking points. To meet a November 30th deadline for Trump and outgoing Mexican President Enrique Pena Nieto, sorry if I got your name wrong, sir, to sign the pact, the text of the agreement must be published by October 1st, but major differences remain. Quote, we discussed some tough issues today, Canada's Freeland told reporters on Thursday after meeting with the U.S. trade representatives. The two trade leaders are due to be in New York next week for United Nations General Assembly, but it was unclear if they would meet. A USTR spokeswoman did not immediately respond to queries about Leitzinger's UN meeting schedule. So, okay, not only is Freeland not scheduled to meet with Leitzinger next week, but we have a deadline of October 1st. Here we are. Here's next week. Freeland left Thursday, and October 1st is the following Monday. So are we gonna cram this in over the weekend, Ms. Freeland? Is that what we're gonna do? We're gonna finish negotiating NAFTA and publish it on Sunday before the deadline? Because what? We're trying to mess with Mr. Trump? Because we're trying to stick it to him? Because you think that maybe he's not gonna win in November? I think either way, this is a losing strategy for Canada. Either way, Canada loses, and loses quite bigly. I don't think that you're negotiating in good faith, Ms. Freeland. It doesn't look like you're negotiating in good faith. It doesn't look like it to Canadians, and it doesn't look like it to Americans either, especially the Americans that matter, like the White House and Mr. Leitzinger. So can you maybe join the free trade agreement that will not decimate our economy? peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Thanks for watching, everybody.